So I just gave Julie Bishop a bit of a serve because her socialist, leftist, anti-life funding of overseas controversial places in the name of helping women is pretty abhorrent use of our tax dollars for foreign aid. Tell me your opinion on foreign aid and how we can improve that. Now, let me catalyse what you're about to say. You expressed recently that you were disappointed that we were going to decrease our foreign aid, and that caused a storm of controversy.
Yeah, yet again, we were going to decrease our foreign aid. Yeah, and it did cause a storm of controversy. With a lot of people saying, that number one, it goes to corrupt governments. Two, we shouldn't be funding Muslims. Three, that we should be looking after our own first. And my comment first up about looking after your own first is, okay, so do you never donate to charity? You do not tithe, because that's a completely self-centered model. Yeah. If that's our model of funding. My issue with foreign aid is this. Australia is the 12th largest economy in the world, and you and I were talking last night, and you expressed surprise that that's actually a fact.
I had no idea it was that huge.
We actually have a quite a large economy, mainly because of the resource, the trade with our resource, but 12th largest economy in the world. And I think that we have a responsibility as the 12th largest economy in the world to shoulder some of the burden for helping the less fortunates in the world. Yeah. And I think first and foremost, we should be helping without a filter. People are people, and so we should be helping people. But what we need, and actually let me just talk
So you're talking without a philosophical filter. You're not talking about willy-nilly and
just giving that. All I'm saying is that I think that we as a country, we've got to be saying, hey, we're here to help people. Yeah. And our foreign aid budget is about helping people.
And just like the Good Samaritan, we're happy to help people we disagree with as well as each other.
Now, I think that when we are helping people, I think we've got to be smart about it. Like, for instance, and people did rage on Facebook about how a lot of foreign aid money is wasted. And here's an example that I'm personally aware of, and this actually came from a government source, that in PNG a few years ago, there was a $12 million grant given from AusAid over to PNG for a particular project. $11 million of that was spent on Aussie consultants doing a study about the project. Because the project was worth $10 million, they only had $1 million left, the project never went ahead. Now that to me is a complete and utter waste of $11 million. Yes. So I get when people are frustrated saying we need to do aid better. Totally get that.
This might be too big of a tangent. What kind of accountability and consequence is there for that kind of waste?
Well, I'm not entirely sure because I'm not part of the AusAid budget.
You didn't hear that?
No. So I don't know what the result is.
So some Australian bureaucrat was in charge of saying, let's spend 90% of our budget on consultants.
Yep, somewhere on the line. And another argument is about corrupt governments.
If anybody knows about that incident or what kind of consequence there is for such a stupid decision, that would never survive in the free market. You're fired.
Yeah, well, but again, it's like, again, I've heard stories from government sources where what often happens in foreign aid is we go in as white people, we're the white nation, we'll go into places like Fiji or Vanuatu or whatever, and we'll go, okay, we're just going to build this for you. I've done some study on poverty, and one of the most disempowering things that the West can do is just go in and say, right, we're going to build this for you. Yeah. Now, here's an example. Now, I was in Vanuatu recently, and I understand that China's not the West, but here's a great example. So in Port Vila, right at the top of the hill, if you've been to Port Vila, there's it's kind of down, and you go right to the top of the hill. The Chinese, because the Chinese are trying to buy the nation, the Chinese have built this massive entertainment complex, right? They didn't really ask the government. They just came in and they said, hey, we want to bless your nation with this huge entertainment complex. But it's only new and it's already falling into disrepair because the Vanuatu government doesn't have the money to maintain it. So that which was meant to be a blessing to the nation then becomes a burden to the nation and then ultimately an eyesore. Yeah.
And one of my recent episodes, Rod McGarvey explained how when he was in Africa, one of the Nordic countries funded a fish factory on a lake in Africa, unbeware that the cultures around hated fish, hated the taste of it, hated the smell of it. Nobody ever was going to work in it or eat the product. It was a complete waste of money because there was no cultural understanding and directed investment.
Because we don't ask. And so certainly from my perspective with global care, anytime we go into a situation, particularly in other nations, it's how can we help you, not I'm coming in with my God complexes and I'm white and I know the best way and I've got all the money and I'm going to tell you what to do. And I think foreign aid could learn from that.
But there is a balance there, isn't it? Because historically, European administrated economies in colonisation have done very well. And if there's a sudden exit and vacuum of that knowledge base and skills, they've fallen into great disrepair immediately.
But hang on, stop. So right there. So the European economies come in and they prop up the economy and they do whatever, and when they leave, it collapses. What it means is the European countries fail to teach and empower the local people, and that's where it's got to be.
There's got to be this middle ground where we're not saying all imperialism is wrong, do everything the indigenous way, and all indigenous ways are wrong, everything has to be done our way. There's this collaborative, consultative,
it has to be
empowering.
It has to be empowering, and that's the word. Where we don't just go in and just to go in and just give people money.
Yeah.
It's so disempowering and so arrogant and offensive.
Yeah.
And so I think there's got to be that. How can we come alongside? To even like your example about building this huge fish factory, because a particular country saw that here's a lake, there's fish, there's people, we'll build a fish factory.
Yeah, makes sense.
How arrogant is that?
Yeah.
So I think with foreign aid, we've got to do better. And I was actually at a community forum on aid in the Shoalhaven, and Julie Bishop, who was then the shadow foreign minister, her and I got talking because we had just at Nowra City just taken up our annual missions offering. It was about 150,000.
Great.
And she actually asked me, what am I going to do with that 150? And so I said, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and we're going to do that. And she said, imagine how much bang for your buck you could get if the government gave you $1 million.
Yeah.
And she said when she gets into power, when the coalition get into power, that she would like to see more NGOs being given part of the foreign aid budget.
And look, that just flagged in my mind the amount of, forgive me, I'm going to insult you if you say this, morons who say churches should be taxed. Like, no, they shouldn't, because we can do it so much more efficiently, so much more effectively. Yeah. You, the taxpayer, we, the taxpayers, can get so much more productivity and efficiency out of every dollar.
Because we often use volunteers, we connect. Right. I mean, when I'm over in Vanuatu, when Global Care's over in Vanuatu, what are we doing? We're connecting with local churches, local INC churches, harnessing their volunteers. So I'm not paying staff, I'm not paying administration. Yeah. So if I've got $100,000 in foreign aid that I can go over and I can rebuild things in Vanuatu, I can basically spend $100,000 on material that then helps the end user.
That's right.
And that's where you get more bang for your buck. And that's what I'd like to see foreign aid.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about Australia being the 12th largest economy in the world. In the same year that Julie Gillard was leader, and we took 12,000 refugees here in coming across from Indonesia, and everyone was raging. We're being overrun, our borders are porous, and we're raging about 12,500 refugees. Pakistan, who's 138th largest economy in the world, took 1.1 million. So you imagine the burden on their economy when they're 138th in the world. I mean, we're 12th.
One second. Are Pakistan providing social welfare for all of those people?
Well, Pakistan would be recipients of UN aid and all that kind of deal, but it's not going to be 100% financed by the UN. Certainly they
You take my point. If we take 12,500 people who land here, we're going to give them health cover, we're going to give them free education, we're probably going to provide them accommodation, and we're probably going to provide them with furniture in a house and a cash income. I don't think Pakistan was going to do that with 1 million people.
You're right. Yeah, very much so. But that's our social welfare system. Yeah. So we've stopped the borders now anyway. Stop the boats coming.
But we could take 1 million people if we didn't have to feed them.
But the question is, okay, I wonder whether we really. Actually, let's come back to that. We take 1 million people. If we didn't have to provide any social welfare and it was all going to be funded by the UN, we wouldn't. Because one of the challenges, I think, if we're going to talk about refugees for a minute.
Well, then we've got our culture issues as well.
That's exactly the point. You know, I think you and I were talking last night. We'd take 1 million people if they were going to become Australians, and that'd be a different dynamic.
Yeah, and look, I heard it expressed this way, and I totally agree with this, because for Conservatives, those right of centre who have some objections to immigration, it's not immigration in itself. It's the fact that, look, when Australia was built on immigration, the people who came here expanded the pie. Now when people come here, they take a piece of the pie.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's okay, but that's fine. There's no resentment to that. We're happy to help feed you, but there's only so much pie. And unless you're going to build it and increase it.
And as you're eating part of the pie, celebrate where the pie comes from.
That's right.
Don't come in and try and change the oven.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But don't try and change the flavour.
I was, it's a halal certified pie. I was travelling to Israel with Tim Costello, and it was this time.
I'd love to have him on the show.
It was awesome. Just 8 days with Tim Costello. Yeah. Awesome.
Tim, if you're watching, you're invited.
I certainly, it was great just to pick his brains and just hear his heart. But it was about March, and the budget had just been handed down. This is a couple of years ago, and again, aid had been cut. And he started talking about the programs that the federal government funds through World Vision that he will now have to decide, or his board will have to decide, which ones are going to be cut. And the cut in the foreign aid budget then becomes very real. Because he's talking about school programs and education programs in some of these tent cities of the Syrian refugees, and stuff that actually has to be cut. And so we can talk about, okay, we can sit here like this, or we can sit behind our keyboards.
Let's cut funding Planned Parenthood International. And there are some things that you and I would agree on totally that we need to cut, and that's fair enough. Yeah, or, just scrap it completely. But what I'm saying is that we can sit here in this location and talk about foreign aid being cut. And that's all kind of very simplistic
and very distant.
Yeah.
But when you're on the ground and you see the projects that now can't happen, that puts it in a whole different light.
And it isn't simplistic. It's complicated and intricate, because we shouldn't be cutting foreign aid, but we also shouldn't be borrowing to prop it up. Agree?
Totally. But and this is my comment on my social media page, when everyone was raging about how we've got to look after ourselves. I said, hang on, let's remember that Peter Costello paid off, the Treasurer under John Howard, paid off the national debt.
Yes.
When the Rudd government came in, we had zero national debt, right?
And some money put away.
And yeah, for the future fund. Then the GFC happened, and Rudd took us, within 9 months of being in power, we were $256 billion in debt. Now, where'd that money go? Well, that
went to China.
No, it did. Well, yeah, through Harvey Norman, because it gave, to stimulate the Australian economy, it gave everybody money. We went out and bought brand new plasma TVs, and now everybody's going, because we're in debt, let's cut the foreign aid budget. And I go, hang on, we're in debt because we all own plasma TVs. Now we're going to cut the foreign aid budget, so
they don't get their rice, we get our TV.
That's my point, right there. Thank you. You summed it up very well.
Yeah. So, if you want to stimulate foreign aid, stop voting for governments that increase spending, increase borrowing, and increase debt, because we can have our plasma TVs and we can feed people the bowl of rice that we have an opportunity and thus an imperative to help, if we just live within our means and have sensible spending and budgets at home.
I read a good article, and I actually reposted this, about how democracy generally lasts 200 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Because what happens is, over a period of time, voters learn that they can get access to the public purse, and by who they vote for.
Yep.
And you have a look at even this last election, both of the major parties were falling over themselves, talking about how much access to the public purse they're going to give everybody.
That's right.
And the same thing's happening in the UK at the moment. I was just reading
and
a
it's
similar
completely
thing.
ignorant, because it actually ends democracy, like you're saying.
Totally.
To go that way. You think that they're robbing the rich to buy votes from the poor, but they're actually robbing everybody to buy votes from the majority.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a spiraling that will crash.
Australia can't. I mean, Australia has a great welfare system. Australia has a great medical system. I mean, one of the best in the world. But we are on an unsustainable path at the moment.
Yeah.
And unless a government comes and starts pushing back on the welfare system. Now, I understand, and I'm not talking about, taking it off people with disabilities or Vietnam or war veterans or whatever. But at some point we have to go, hang on. Our welfare system is not sustainable. I think at the moment it's 38 cents in every tax dollar goes to welfare. So that's not infrastructure, that's not defence, that's not anything. It's not education, it's not hospital, it's just welfare. 38 cents in every tax dollar. Yeah. At what point do we say is it 50 cents? Is that the limit where we go, okay, half of our tax dollar? And so if we keep going down this pathway of debt, I can't entirely say that this is the actual figure, but I think it's $180 million a day. I think that's it, that we pay in interest.
Yeah.
Because our debt at the moment, we've just increased.
The number's so big, it's almost meaningless.
Well, 600. I think we owe 600 billion, or that's the new debt ceiling. So we're heading to 600 billion, $600,000 million.
And even the phrase debt ceiling is meaningless because whenever they hit it, they just raise it.
Well, it's like if I max out my credit card and I just go to the bank and go, oh look, I'm having some trouble spending. I'm having some trouble at the moment. I'm spending more than I'm earning. Yep. I've maxed out my $2,000 credit card. Can I have $3,000? And the bank goes, yeah, sure. Yep. So but the problem is, you've got America at the moment that's technically bankrupt. I can't ever see how America is going to get out of debt. And an interesting thing to Google is the American debt clock. Yep. And it's spinning. You could use it as a fan if it was a real clock. It's just going up. But for Australia, you imagine like $180 million a day.
I think are we over $500 million yet?
Yeah, I think it's 540 was the budget. Yeah. No, that's $500 billion. Yeah, $500 billion. 500 billion. But I think is America like
around Easter time we hit it.
4, 5, 6 trillion, some huge amount of money. But anyway, again, figures that you and I can't understand.
Okay, so sum up foreign aid for me. What should we do?
I think we need to stop reducing foreign aid. I'd actually like to see it expand a little bit. But we need to spend it better.
Have we been spending it better? Has there been an improvement?
I think the coalition do better. Yep. I think there's some issues. You've mentioned one area particularly that's bad that we spend. There's always going to be those issues. Yep. So I think we are spending it better. I think the coalition are working more effectively. Yep. But I think we can do a lot better.
Okay, I really appreciate you coming in today and making the time. You're a great mind to bounce off. Peter's contact details are in the description beneath the video here, so please get in touch, follow his blog, support the charity, and if you're a partner of Church and State, we're actually going to continue the conversation now in a bonus segment that's exclusive for our partners at $9 a month or higher. And I'm just loving having a chat with you so much. It doesn't need to finish right away. Great. I think you've got a little bit more time.
Sure.
So that'll be good. For all the rest of you, thank you, and we'll see you on Facebook, social media, and next week's episode. Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.